we need to talk about Medicaid fraud. Medicaid fraud is the basis by which Republicans argued they needed to cut almost $1 trillion of Medicaid funding over the next 10 years. That will throw 17 million Americans off of their health insurance. It will raise everybody's prices because it's going to defund and close rural hospitals, which will drive up the costs of healthcare in other hospitals because they're losing their Medicaid funding, and which is going to drive up everybody's health insurance premiums, and it's going to drive up everybody's health insurance costs. We've all seen Mike Johnson said that there's $50 billion a year in Medicaid fraud, very strongly implying and sometimes outright stating that the fraud that is being committed against Medicaid is from patients improperly seeking medical care, which they then twist into people who are lazy, sitting at home on their couch and mooching off of the government when they're not entitled to do that. The vast majority of Medicaid fraud that does exist is from healthcare providers, not patients. Reading information from the FBI's own website, fraud committed by medical providers, double billing, submitting multiple claims for the same service, phantom billing, billing for a service or visit or supplies the patient never received, unbundling, submitting multiple bills for the same service, upcoding, billing for a more expensive service than the patient actually received. What are some of the types of fraud that are committed by Medicaid patients? Identity swapping. So it's like there's someone who does need medical care, who can't afford insurance but doesn't qualify for Medicaid, using the identity of somebody who's on Medicaid to go get the medical care that they actually need. Or impersonating a healthcare professional, and again, pretending they are a provider and billing for health services or equipment without a medical license. So let's break down some numbers here. The Kaiser Family Foundation put out a study. In 2024, Medicaid paid in an estimated 95% of total outlays properly, meaning 95% of Medicaid's payments were proper, representing $580 billion in proper federal payments in 2024. Improper, and we'll define this here in a second, improper Medicaid payments amounted to 5%, or $31 billion in federal payments. However, 80% of those improper payments were improper because they were lacking some documentation. If the complete documentation had been submitted, those would have been proper payments. So in reality, out of over $600 billion in payments in 2024, $6 billion of them were legitimately not proper payments. That's 1%. So Medicaid has a fraud rate of 1%. Critically, and this is from a study that was released in January of this year from Georgetown University, fraud against Medicaid is most commonly committed by providers. To crack down on fraud, Congress and the administration should follow the money. Every year, the Department of Justice and Health and Human Services Office of Inspector General publish a report on their efforts to hold to account bad actors in Medicaid and other federal healthcare programs. The December 2024 report, so 7 months ago, lists examples of the different kinds of fraud against Medicaid that the agencies identified and prosecuted. Among those convicted were ambulance service providers, durable medical equipment suppliers, diagnostic labs, nursing homes, pain clinics, pharmacies, physical therapists, physicians, and substance use treatment providers. No Medicaid beneficiaries, the patients, the people that MAGA says are sitting at home too lazy to work and just sitting there collecting Medicaid benefits, no beneficiaries are listed there. None, not one. The victims of fraud against Medicaid and enrollees, the victims of fraud against Medicaid are people who are enrolled in Medicaid, the beneficiaries, honest medical providers, and the taxpayers. Everything that MAGA has been told about Medicaid fraud is a lie, but because they're stupid and gullible and loud and mean, they have run with those lies and are now convinced that Medicaid fraud consists of fat, lazy Democrats who refuse to work and who sit at home collecting medical benefits that they're not entitled to. When the DOJ, Health and Human Services, the FBI, Georgetown, and the Kaiser Family Foundation, all of whom have done extensive studies, investigations, and prosecutions of Medicaid fund fraud, have determined that it is providers committing fraud. And the fraud is 1% per year. 1% per year. But Republicans and Donald Trump have used that 1% of fraud per year to justify terminating $1 trillion worth of funding for Medicaid over the next decade, which is going to cost 17 million Americans their health insurance coverage and their Medicaid benefits, which is going to kill people. It's going to kill Americans. The MAGA Cheds also believe that there are all kinds of undocumented immigrants who benefit from Medicaid, and they are statutorily prohibited from doing so. Because the MAGA base are too fucking stupid to understand the obvious point. They are clawing back $1 trillion in Medicaid funding so that they can give that money to Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Mark Andreessen, and Peter Thiel in the form of tax cuts for billionaires for people who are already billionaires. That's why they're taking away your health coverage and your health care. The MAGA base believes that there's $1 trillion worth of fraud in Medicaid that benefits fat, lazy Democrats who won't work and undocumented immigrants. So they will, because they're stupid and gullible, they will continue to vote against their own interests. Morons. I hope they get everything they voted for.